Okay, y'all, take two. I cut take one off prematurely, so we're gonna try and make a run at this again. Discussion of some of the questions out of element two for the technician amateur radio exam. Okay, we're gonna look at some of the questions and talk about topics not discussed in previous videos. I'm not going to hit every one here, but we'll talk about some of them. Okay, and if there's any questions or things I need to cover later, I can make another video. We'll go from there. Okay, first question I wanted to hit. Which of the following entities recommends transmit receive channels and other parameters for auxiliary and repeater stations? Correct answer here is volunteer frequency coordinators recognized by amateur radio operators. This will be a council, a group rather, set up by each state. In Illinois, it's the Illinois Repeater Association. In Missouri, it's the Missouri Repeater Council. This is a group of people who are set up, and people, I might add, are appointed usually by people responsible for maintaining the repeaters in each individual state. So not every ham in every state will make this appointment. Just those responsible for repeater maintenance, interested in repeater operations, etc. Okay. Say you want to set up a repeater, 6 meters, 2 meters, 440, whatever, in your particular state. Okay. You have to fill out some paperwork, send it to them. They're going to make sure that the frequency that you want to put your repeater on will not interfere with anybody local to you, or if you're close to a state line, somebody in the adjoining state. For example, I'm close to St. Louis over here, so if I wanted to put one up here, they're going to look at Missouri as well to make sure Missouri doesn't have a repeater on that same frequency or somewhere close, to make sure that my repeater will not interfere with anything going on in southern Illinois or eastern Missouri, just to avoid interference. Okay, who selects the frequency coordinator? The answer here being amateur operators in a local or regional area whose stations are eligible to be repeater or auxiliary stations. This will normally come back to what's called the repeater trustees. And each club will have a repeater trustee, or sometimes a repeater is not affiliated with a club. It'll be just a ham that wants to put a repeater up. That'll be the repeater trustee. Those are the people that decide who these coordinators are, and go from there. Okay, we'll go along here. We've talked about races. When is willful interference to other amateur radio stations permitted? We've talked about this, and never, at no time. No, we don't play like that. Okay, another good question. What is the International Telecommunication Union? And it is a United Nations agency for information and communication technology issues. The globe is broken up into, as I recall, 3 ITU zones, and they set the rules for all amateur services worldwide. And then your local entities such as the FCC in the States, or I believe it's radio industry in Canada, will further subdivide the rules for amateurs in a given country. But the ITU is the big dog. Let's see, we talked about that. We talked about that. We talked about that. What is the limitation for emissions on frequencies between 219 and 220? I thought we had lost part of that band years ago. It seemed like we had gone from 220 to 225, and then we lost 3 megahertz of that band some years ago to UPS. Maybe we got some of that back. This is one I'm going to have to look into. It gives the answer of fixed digital message forwarding systems only. Like I said, I thought we lost part of that band years ago, but I don't play around on 220. Never really have messed with it. So, without keeping up on it, I've lost it. Oh, look further. Okay, which of the following VHF, UHF frequency ranges are limited to CW only? 50.0 to 50.1 on 6 meters, and 144.0 to 144.1 on 2 meters. Okay, now all ham bands will be broken up into part of it's for CW, part of it's for sideband. You can run CW through an entire band. It is allowed, but generally considered poor practice if you start operating CW where the sideband boys tend to operate. Also, there are parts of the band where the digital guys like to operate. We like to leave them alone, let the digital guys operate from this point to this point, sideband guys over here, FM over here, AM over there. That way we're not interfering with each other, messing with each other. Kind of a common courtesy thing. But look at your band charts and see where it tells you. Okay, CW is over here, RTTY, whatever's here, etc. So that you're not tearing up the other folks. Common courtesy. Okay. Let's see. Which of the following is a result of the fact that the amateur radio service is secondary in all or portions of some amateur bands, such as portions of the 70 centimeter or 440 megahertz band? This here says U.S. amateurs may find non-amateur stations in those portions and must avoid interfering with. I've never encountered this problem in 35 years. I've never heard really of us being a secondary or having to avoid interference. The only exception being 30 meters, 10.1 to 10.15. There are some telemetry stations around there that kind of do their own thing, and we will go up or down band just a little bit to avoid messing with them. But I've always regarded that more common courtesy than law. So that's the only band I've ever known it to be on. Why should you not set your transmit frequency to be exactly at the edge of an amateur band or a subband? A, to allow for calibration error in the transmitter frequency display. This was more prevalent when displays were analog and not digital. B, so that the modulation sidebands do not extend beyond the band edge. C, to allow for transmitter frequency drift. Or D, all of these are correct, and that is your choice. All are correct. If you start operating right on the band edge, part of your transmission is going to be in band, part of it will be out of band. If you're right there on the band edge. So you know your band edges and you move up just a little bit. So your entire signal is in the confines of the particular band you're allowed to operate. And transmitters used to have a drift problem. This is not so prevalent anymore with transistors and what's called TCXO, transmitter calibration crystal oscillator. What it is in phase lock loop circuits, they will drift a little bit with temperature. So it will be at one frequency a little bit when you first turn the radio on, but then drift as the radio warms up. Well, this will account for them variations in temperature. Yaesu was the first one I saw working on this back in the 1990s. I want to say it was with the FT1000. And I believe the other manufacturers are on board with this, Kenwood and Nikon. I'm sure Tentec is as well. Tentec still had some rigs a few years back with crystal oscillators on it, which crystal oscillators tend to be far more less prone to drift. So this was not so problematic. Let's see what else we got here. Which of the following HF bands have frequencies available to the technician class operator for RTTY and data transmission? Correct answer here is the 10 meter amateur band only. 10 meters is a lot of fun, by the way, y'all, so make sure to look into that. You may want to get a 10 meter rig, especially now that the solar cycle is starting to pick up. You can often tune a CB antenna for 10 meter operations. And when 10 meters really starts to pop, you can start talking worldwide, literally, low power, what have you. It really becomes a lot of fun, and do it with a technician class license. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. The maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators using their assigned portions of the HF band. For a technician, it's 200 watts. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, given that the other grades are permitted 1500, but you're honestly not going to need all that power. Most rigs, HF rigs, top out at 100, and that is quite honestly all you'll really ever need. If you get to playing with what we call QRP, low power stuff, 5 watts, you can have a lot of fun with 5 watts. You really can. I've had a lot of fun with 5 watts. 10 meters, one day I got into Belgium, running 5 watts on 10 meters. So that made my day. Okay, except for some specific restrictions, what is the maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators using frequencies above 30 megahertz? This is where it goes up. This is where techs get all amateur privileges, and that's 1500 watts. But nobody I've known, I don't recall anybody ever running that much power on 2 meters. Again, it's typically 100, not even 100 on 2 meters that I've ever seen. All right, we'll go down to the next section here and talk a little bit. For which license classes are new licenses currently available from the FCC? Now, all 5 license classes that I've talked about currently exist: the novice, the technician, the general, the advanced, and the extra. However, not all 5 of them are available from the FCC anymore. You only get 1 of 3 anymore: the technician, the general, and the amateur extra. Those are the only ones given these days. Okay, who may select a desired call sign under the vanity call sign rules? And that is open to any licensed amateur. What types of international communications is an FCC licensed amateur radio station permitted to make? Communications incidental to the purposes of the amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. Personal chit chat. Broadcasting and things like that still are not. Let's see, when are you allowed to operate your amateur station in a foreign country? And that's when the foreign country authorizes it. Let's see, what is the following valid call sign for a technician? K1XXX. We talked about call signs in a previous video. A 1x3 call sign would be given for a technician, although these days it's probably going to be a 2x3 call. It's probably what you're going to get from the FCC now that they've run out. Most of them have run out of 2x3s. Let's see, from which of the following locations may an FCC licensed amateur station transmit? And the correct answer: from any vessel or craft located in international waters and documented or registered in the United States. What may result when correspondence from the FCC is returned as undeliverable because the grantee failed to provide and maintain a correct mailing address with the FCC. And that is revocation of the station license or the suspension of the operator license. You do need to have a valid mailing address with the FCC. It can be a P.O. box, can be your mom and dad's place, can be your own personal residence, can be out at the bug out farm, wherever you want your mail delivered. But it has to be a deliverable place by the USPS. Okay. Now, for those of you in the prepping world, don't get excited about this, over tracking and they're coming to get me, or the government's after me, or any of this kind of stuff. Now, years ago, instead of Form 605, which is what we have now, we had the 610. And on the 610, they had two separate fill-in sections. One was for your physical mailing address. 1000 County Road 1700 in Timbuktu, Egypt. Okay, whatever, you get the point. But then they had a separate line for physical station location. Okay, if you put Rural Route 2, Box 100 as your mailing address, how are they going to be able to find that if they want to come and look at your equipment? They're not. So, in that slot, you had to write, intersection of John Boy Road and Billy Boulevard, something like that. 300 foot northeast from that intersection is your station operating location. And they have since nixed that. They have bigger fish to fry. They're not going to come looking at your station unless you're really screwing something up. They're getting a lot of complaints about you interfering with a lot of people, and first thing they're going to do is mail you a letter saying, hey, we're getting reports that you're misbehaving, knock it off. If it keeps happening, then they're going to want to come see you. But don't worry about them coming after you if you're playing by the rules. They're not going to mess with you. No tracking chips in the equipment, anything like that. So don't get excited. Normal term for an FCC issued primary amateur radio license, 10 years. Used to be that if you changed your address, you put in for what was called a modification grant, you upgraded your license, you moved, whatever, they would automatically renew it for 10 years. Not anymore. If your license expires January 1st, 2022, and you put in a change of address now, it'll still expire January 1st, 2022. You'll then have to file another one for renewal of your amateur license, probably in December of 21, to renew it for another 10 years. Grace period following the expiration of an amateur license within which a license may be renewed, 2 years. So if you forget, oh crap, my license expired, I've got to get it renewed, you've got 2 years to get it renewed. If you don't, you're going to have to retest and get a new license. Had a friend over here in one of the adjoining towns that did just that. She forgot about it. We caught it within the 2-year period. I got her the paperwork. She got it submitted. Got her original call. Didn't have to retest. No problem. Okay, how soon after passing the examination for your first amateur radio license may you operate a transmitter on the amateur radio service frequency? And this is as soon as your operator station license grant appears in the FCC license database. What it is, this has gone all online now. You have the entire amateur service. My name, my call, my address, and everything appears on there, as does every amateur in the country. Okay, this is called the Universal Licensing System. You can do a search for that. If Google doesn't give it to you, fcc.gov, and then start going through the menus for the Universal Licensing System. And you can look up by call sign, by name, etc. Back in the old days, you had to wait for the license to come in the mail, like I've told you about. But now, as soon as it appears there, you're good to go. All right. If your license has expired and is still within the allowable grace period, may you continue to operate the transmitter on amateur radio service frequencies. This says no, transmitting not allowed until the FCC database shows that the license has been renewed. Okay, that clears out that section. Alright, with which countries are FCC licensed amateur radio stations prohibited from exchanging communications? Answer here is any country whose administration has notified the ITU that it objects to certain communications. Y'all have seen certain countries that are just buttheads about stuff. I've never encountered this, but this is going to be DX stuff, and until the bands really pick up, this is going to be non-noticeable, but it is a question on the test, so you need to know. Let's see, we talked about that. When is it permissible to transmit messages encoded to hide their meaning? And only when transmitting control commands to space stations or radio controlled craft. You're transmitting telemetry to the space station, or you're operating a drone or an RC car or something. Those get hidden. Otherwise, no. Let's see. Under what conditions is an amateur station authorized to transmit music during a phone emission? When incidental to an authorized retransmission of manned spacecraft communication. You're talking to the space station or something like that, and they're putting it out up there, and you're retransmitting that to something down here on an Earth station, then it's permissible. Otherwise, it's not. Let's see. When may amateur radio operators use their stations to notify other amateurs of the availability of equipment for sale or trade? The answer here is when the equipment is normally used in an amateur station and such activity is not conducted on a regular basis. Usually you'll hear this during a weekly net when we're on the air doing a training exercise or regular meeting on the air. There will sometimes be like a swap shop feature, for sale or trade. I've got my little ICOM over here I'm looking to get rid of, or something like that. That's when you'll hear something like that. What, if any, are the restrictions concerning transmissions of language that may be considered indecent or obscene? We've talked about that. Any such language is prohibited. Let's see, what types of amateur stations can automatically retransmit their signals of other amateur stations? Repeaters, auxiliary stations, or space stations? Oh, excuse me. In which of the following circumstances may the control operator of an amateur station receive compensation for operating the station? And when the communication is incidental to classroom instruction or an educational institution. We've talked about that, something such as the ARRL, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, something like that. Under which circumstances are the following amateur stations authorized to transmit signals related to broadcasting, program production, or news gathering, assuming no other means is available? And that's the kicker, no other means available. Only where such communications directly relate to the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. Severe weather, something like that. They're SHTF, okay? What is the meaning of the term broadcasting in FCC rules for the amateur radio service? And that's, we talked about that. Transmissions intended for reception by the general public. Not specific to the amateur radio service, but to the general public as a whole. When may an amateur station transmit without on-the-air identification when transmitting signals to a control model aircraft? RC, boat, something like that. But I've never known these to operate within the confines of the amateur radio service. Okay, they normally have their own frequencies when you're radio controlling to a drone, to a boat, to an RC car. There used to be RC channels in the CB radio service years ago, 49 megahertz, and they've gone up. I've never known them to be inside the bands of the amateur service. Perhaps I'm wrong about that, but that's been my experience. All right, we'll look at some of this other. Let's see, we talked about all that. When is an amateur station permitted to transmit without a control operator? And that is never. There shall always be a control operator. Who may be the control operator of a station communicating through an amateur satellite or a space station? The answer here being an amateur whose license privileges allow them to transmit on these satellite uplink frequencies. This is usually going to be either 2 meters or 440, usually. Sometimes the uplink will be on 10 meters or 1.2 gigahertz, but normally 2 meters or 440, so the technician class is generally covered by this. Who must designate the station control operator? That is the licensee, and both of them then take responsibility. This is usually the same party, usually. Not always, but usually. During contesting, like at field day, responsibility normally falls, if you're using the club call, this normally falls to the club, the trustee for the club call sign, and that person then can appoint the control operator, because this is a 24-hour event, and not many of us can stay up for 24 hours solid, so they will appoint a control operator to watch over things during their absence. Let's see, what determines the transmitting privileges of an amateur station? The class of the operator licensed by the control operator. This is why club stations will normally have a trustee who holds an extra class license. That way they have all operating privileges, and you don't have to worry about going out of band for the technician or the general. So they will usually pick an extra class operator for it. Let's see, we've talked about control point. When under normal circumstances may a technician class license be the control operator of a station operating in an exclusive amateur extra class operator segment of the bands? That is at no time. And again, this is why we will pick an extra most of the time for club stations, so that we have all privileges going with that license. When the control operator is not the station licensee, who is responsible for the proper operation of the station? And that is the control operator, and the station licensee are equally responsible. So if you start getting out of band, start getting into trouble, both of you can get busted. What is the following? Which of the following is an automatic control? That is a repeater. Although most beacon stations are automatically controlled. Let's see. Which of the following is true of remote control operations? A, the control operator must be at the control point. B, the control operator is required at all times. C, the control operator indirectly manipulates the controls. Or D, the correct answer, all of these is correct. Which of the following is an example of remote control as defined in Part 97? Operating the station over the internet. With the advent of the internet, this is possible. Many 2-meter repeaters now are attached to what's called Echolink, and this is getting into a repeater via the internet instead of a traditional radio. And control commands to the repeater can oftentimes be done via Echolink. Of course, this is something we didn't have years ago, but it's certainly there now. Okay, who does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station, unless documentation of the contrary is in the station records? And we've talked about that. The station licensee. These are assumed to be one and the same unless it's spelled out different. Like you're at field day, the station licensee and the control operator are not the same being. Otherwise, they're assumed to be the same person. All right, with that, we're at half an hour. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here, folks. Get this uploaded, and we will deal with some more questions at another time. And with that, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. If you got questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section, and we'll talk some more. With that, see y'all later. Jimbo out.